Rachel was loved. She was certainly loved by her mother. She loved her brother loved her. She was kind of like the central person of that family.
She was so much the central person and the person that they all looked to and she was the youngest, but she was the one that held that family together. But I think that often happens, that some people or some children have the spark and they know where they're needed and that's where they go. It was in her nature, actually.
And Burg, welcome to the Bookaholic podcast.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited.
Yes, so am I. I will tell you, I've already got tons, at least 100 books, at least, that I haven't read at my house, that I bought 2-3 years ago, books during the pandemic, etc.
I have the same problem.
And then two, folks send me books. I get books from all types of folks, all over the country, really all over the world. And your book came in, Force of Nature, a novel about Rachel Carson, who I've been calling the godmother of environmentalism. Maybe there's another description for her. But anyway, just something told me to read this book. I will tell you, somewhere in junior high, which for me was like the 7th, 8th, or 9th grade, in some class, we learned about Rachel Carson. And I remember, what was her book? It was Silent Spring. Silent Spring was her book. And I remember the teacher telling us about her. And I remember thinking that was so intriguing, etc. And it wasn't, a whole study on her, but I guess she was just a part of, maybe we were studying pollution.
Right.
Or, and smog, because that was smog times. And and then her name probably came up in the studies. And, but then from then on, of course, at that time, there was no internet, so I couldn't run home and Google her or any more further information.
The hard times we had.
Yes, exactly. And so I didn't think about Rachel Carson until this book arrived at my house. And so I went ahead and I said, well, let me read this book. And it's beautiful. The illustrations are beautiful. They're actually comforting. And it's written in verse, just like poetry. I just love that. This is the second book that I've read this year. The other one was Kwame Alexander's Door of No Return, that's written kind of like this. And I discovered, I love books written in like verse. I love that. And that was a middle school book too. So I don't know if I'm on some type of trend, but I'm loving middle school books of historical fiction written in verse. That's very niche down. Niche down.
Good. I like writing too, so that's a good thing.
Yes. So you're a writer of young people's books, but what made you want to write this book about Rachel Carson?
Well, I'm kind of like you. I knew about her, and I think I called her the mother of the environmental movement. And so I knew about her in the back of my mind, but really all I knew was that she wrote Silent Spring, and that at some point in my life I read Silent Spring. I really know much about her, but I was getting kind of anxious about climate change and what can one person do, and I didn't really have a firm grasp. So I was kind of researching on my own, just for my own edification. And her name popped up a few times, and I remember her. She's the mother of and I could still even see her face from the back of the book, apparently. But I didn't know anything about her. And so I kind of got curious about her. And curiosity is always the first step in writing. I got curious about her when I read books about her. and reread some of her work, and I was totally enthralled. And I thought to myself, this is a person that we need to shine the light on again. We don't wake up being heroes and leaders. Something put her on this path, and I was interested in what that path was.
Most definitely, most definitely. Going back again, this is a middle grade book. And, there's with all the things that's going on with books in libraries in different states, when I read your book, it talked a lot about various things. It hinted at things I feel. And then, too, it appears that Rachel had a very tough life. She had a very tough life from not having many friends, from a family that experienced, families do, but just different tragedies, financial, emotional. Did you ever think this is too much to expose middle graders to?
Absolutely. And I talked to my editor about that too. But in the back of my mind, Rachel was nothing else. Rachel was honest, and she was honest with herself and honest with the world. And so I
Mhm.
felt like if I read something, that I needed to include it in the book. If I was going to tell her story, then I would have to kind of respect Rachel's story. And so I did worry about it, and I did have conversations with my editor, whether particularly about her illness, and at the end, and how much you want to expose and how much kids are exposed to. And then I thought to myself, whatever we think as adults that children should or should not hear, they
Right.
hear and they
Yeah.
know. And
They
I
do.
would rather frame it in a way that's truthful for children, that's truthful, and maybe leaving out the goriest of details, but always
Right.
this sadness exists in the world. I think that's part of the draw of Rachel Carson, because she did experience such loss and such worry and tragedy in her life. And yet she found her comfort in nature, which is
Yes.
really what I would hope that we take away from it.
Right, right.
That
There was so many things there. Nature was like her spiritual home. When she was stricken with cancer and other people in her life had
right,
passed away, she would always tell her niece, they would always turn to nature. And so it was just very, it still gave you the element of hope, because
right.
nature is going to be there.
It's always renewing itself. And I think that I was talking to someone who was asking me that she was very close to her mother, and she credited her mother rightly for teaching her everything that she knew about, for exposing her to the wonder of nature. But then I
Yes.
also felt in many ways that it was nature herself that brought up Rachel, because
Yes.
where Rachel found her comfort. And also, she discovered through nature that it's dark now, but the light will come. It's
Mhm.
winter now, but spring will come. And I think that that rhythm in her life is what helped her to cope with the many things that happened. And I think that maybe this was a good time that kids should know that
Yeah.
when you're sad or upset, or things don't go your way, look to nature, and there's always tomorrow.
Right,
Um,
exactly, exactly. That's a very good point. Early on when reading, the family apparently lived on a farm not too far from Pittsburgh,
right.
Pennsylvania, during the era where the United States was the world leader in U.S. steel, in steel
Yeah.
production. And that pollution apparently was making its way downstate or wherever they lived in relation to that. Seems to have had an effect on Rachel's family. Was there anything during your research that you found out where maybe the family confronted the industry or anything like that, or if there was any type of movement at that time?
I don't think there was any type of movement at that time. When they actually, the father comes through in the story that the father was unhappy with his choices, that things, his life
Mhm.
had not
Right.
turned out as he planned. And he had
Right.
all his money buying this large plot of land that he thought he was going to break into parcels and sell to people. But the winds of Pittsburgh development went in the opposite direction, and people were not looking to live where Rachel was living. So
Oh,
I don't think that they ever confronted them directly, but I know I did read where he could have sold some of the land to people who would have developed it for industry, and he didn't
uh,
want to do that. So I don't think that they ever actually confronted it. It was
yeah,
more,
right, exactly, exactly. Well, the mother, even though Rachel and her mother were very close, the mother did put a lot of pressure on Rachel from an early age. You can't get all the way the relationship between the mom and dad, probably pretty contentious a little bit,
it sounded
but
like,
father failed her when her oldest son failed her, when the middle daughter failed her. She was always leaning on Rachel. You knew that Rachel was her favorite.
yes.
Um, did Rachel, from your research, exhibit any, feelings from that? My mother's, putting a lot of pressure on me.
From what I read, she never, and also she never said it. She never spoke about her father. She never said negative things. There were never any
Right.
negative things. But I did read some of her letters, and one of her letters kind of
Oh,
alluded to the fact that she, there was a lot on her plate, but that
mhm.
she, you know, a little disappointed that things turned out the way. But maybe you'd say it in passing to your best friend or something, but you wouldn't she wasn't a complainer. She
Uh,
didn't complain. I feel that I wanted to suggest that because that was all that it was just suggested to me. Uh,
mhm.
but there's really, I don't think any way that there couldn't have been a lot of pressure on her. She
Most
was carrying
definitely.
the whole family by the end of her, towards the end of her life, that she was it. She was there
Yes.
for everything. But
Yes.
she just found her comfort outside and took her breath and took her hard knocks, I think.
Yeah.
I
She
admire
sure.
her.
Yes, most definitely. Now, she was, even though the family had some emotional crises, I say, financial crises, they did go through the depression and through wars, as many families did that spanned that time period.
Right, right.
But Rachel was loved. She was certainly loved by her mother. She loved her brother loved her. She was kind of like the central person of that family.
She was so much the central person, and the person that they all looked to and she was the youngest, but she was the
Hmm.
one that held that family together. But I think that
Hmm.
often happens that some people or some children have the spark and they know where they're needed and that's where they go.
Yeah.
It was in her nature, actually. So
Yes. Yeah.
I think that's true what you're saying.
Yes. Now, you wrote this in verse. So, did you write this in verse because of Rachel was also a poet, or is that the typical way you write?
My past 5 books have been verse novels, and the reason uh, I write in verse is because I feel it gives me more of a direct connection with the character. Because if I'm writing in verse, first I used to be an English teacher, so
Okay.
when I write, that grammarian in me kind of is a little bit choking, chokes.
Yeah.
Don't end the sentence with a preposition, or don't, I'm too aware of all that. But if when
Right.
I write in verse, I'm just channeling the character, the fictional character, or in this case, Rachel. And I think that when that happens for me, then I'm not really writing about Rachel. I'm not writing about a character. I'm writing as if I am the character. And it's easier for me to just let things flow honestly without that other voice in my head saying
Mhm.
what an English teacher would say. Not that there isn't a place for grammar, there is.
Right. Well, most definitely, it's a place for grammar, but I understand exactly what you're saying, though, and so that I really appreciate that. Now, going back to Rachel's early years, you did give the reader quite a description in who Rachel was at a very early age, instead of just coming in and maybe starting her off in college and her studies, and then she becomes a professional and all of these things. Why did you want to do that? Because it certainly made me have a lot of empathy for Rachel and wanted me to, I wanted her to win. You know, I did want her to live up to her mother's expectations. And I was just praying as I went along that she would be able to, and that Silent Spring wasn't just a one off. And it was not, because she, for her day and for the time frame and for the money that people made at that time, she was pretty successful.
Yeah, she was very successful at the
Hmm.
end. I
Hmm.
think that what happens when we have our heroes, and when kids read about heroes, and when I read about heroes, or when I read about important people in history, you always hear about them at their finest. And my
Right.
and like they're made at, like, we have them chiseled and we have our heroes chiseled into the top of the mountains, and that's how they were. And I think
Hmm.
that we might, think whatever they've done is so wonderful, but we forget their humanity. And
Right.
so what I want kids to see in any book I write is the humanity of a character or a person. And so I think that I needed to show Rachel as a child to emphasize her humanity. All these people that make a difference in the world, they also have lives, their personal lives, and sometimes they're complicated lives, and sometimes they're difficult lives. They're
Hmm.
not always heroes. They're not always.
Right.
And I think that in all of my work, I try to emphasize the humanity. I never want a reader to say, "Yeah, I could never be like that. I could never do something like that." I want them
Right.
to see that everyone starts from that point, and that one person really can make a difference if we
Yes.
believe in ourselves. And I think that was the wonderful thing about Rachel, that she had a strong sense of self and what was
Right.
good, right, and what was true.
Yes, 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 yes. Very, very good. Now, like I said before, there's a lot of things that the kids are exposed to, and that's a very good thing. The father's emotional distance. So if you were reading that and you're a middle grader, and you would be able maybe to relate to that, because that goes on in people's everyday lives. Parent pressure is certainly there with the tiger moms and helicopter moms and all of these things. Then you've got the failure of the family structure, which a lot of people live on a day to day basis, and they were depending on the youngest person in the family. But there was the hint or the undercurrent of Rachel's relationship with some women. Was there any, and it never did say that she dated anybody of a male. Was that a hint of
I think
possibly relationships with the women, or?
I don't I don't know. I think that she did go on a date when she was in college, but she really
Oh,
didn't enjoy it. She didn't enjoy it. And she became very, very, very close friends with a friend, Dorothy, that she met
yeah,
when she moved to Maine.
right.
She was a private person, and so there's nothing ever exposed through what I could read. You could possibly believe something like that. She might have been drawn to women, which is not also understandable, that that's what she was surrounded with. She was surrounded by an overpowering mother. So I know she was very good friends with Dorothy. I know the book of letters between the two of them is very thick and very
Mm,
loving, but they themselves were private people. And so none of that is really spelled out. And so I didn't feel it was my job as a middle grade author to spell it out. So all I can
right.
do is kind of put the undercurrents there, let people discover for themselves if they are
Ex-
interested in reading her letters, or learning more. That would
yeah,
be that's outside the realm of my portrait of what I'm saying about her. But I do.
gotcha. One thing I loved about the book, it was her feminist nature that came out in her illness. And I remember reading that she was saying one of her friends who was pregnant, and I guess she went to the doctor with her husband, and the physician wouldn't even look at the woman who was pregnant, and he was busy talking to her husband. And the
Yes.
same type of thing happened to her during her cancer illness. The doctor wouldn't even look at her. He didn't even tell her the truth.
They weren't, because, and we look at our lives now, but it really can. I want to say blow your mind, but that just is not a great phrase. But that how women were looked at then. It's oh, I
Mhm.
cannot believe it in my own lifetime. Not my own lifetime, but in close enough to my own lifetime that it's just amazing to me that
Yeah,
women were just discounted. It was just everything in here, although it's fictionalized, it's based on true things, true little
right.
tidbits, stories that were shared. She had to have a chaperone come with her when she went on her deep dive,
Yeah,
and it's
yes,
it's just amazing. Uh,
yeah.
when you think of the world she was living in and she had the courage that she had to speak out, it's even more amazing than someone today. Although, even, we seem to be going backwards instead of forward, but
Oh, I know. I know, but
right,
we still want to believe we are on that trajectory of going
right,
forward. Definitely.
absolutely, absolutely.
Well, well, the unfortunately, in accordance to humans, she died too soon.
Yes.
And what is out there where people can, outside of Silent Spring and your wonderful force of nature, what else is out there that someone could grasp upon? Are there any statues or any memorials for
There
her?
are
Any?
there's a her homestead. I don't know if it's open now because I couldn't get to it. It's in Pennsylvania. There's a Pennsylvania. If you look up the Rachel Carson homestead, that's where she grew up, and they had a museum there, or it was at one point open, but then during the pandemic it closed, and I don't know that it's been opened yet.
Okay.
The main house that she is in is owned by her nephew now, and I think it can be rented, uh, but I don't know for sure. I know it can be rented, but I don't know how you would go about that. And
Right.
so there are lots of places that have tributes to her in the
Oh,
places
good.
that she lived. The Rachel Carson Society and the Rachel Carson Homestead would give you some background information on that.
Oh, wonderful. I will definitely look both of those up. Now, you've also, like I said, you've also written other middle grade books, and you wrote one. It's very intriguing to me. Let me see if I can find the name of the book. It's Seraphina's Promise,
Yes.
was named an ALA Notable Parents' Choice Gold winner and an NAACP Award finalist. What is Seraphina's Promise about?
Seraphina's Promise is about Haiti and the at the time of the earthquake. And I was writing something totally different, and a picture flashed on my computer, a news flash, and there was a
Mhm.
little girl that was being held by walking with her father, and you could just see the back of her father and her face, and I just couldn't get her out of my mind. And I
Wow.
was curious, and so I started reading about Haiti, and I knew that it was a poor country. That's about all I knew about it.
Yeah.
And even now, it's heartbreaking for me to read the news about Haiti because it's a really beautiful culture with really,
Mhm.
really beautiful people
Right.
and loving people. So I wanted people to know more about Haiti than just it's the poorest country in the hemisphere. So that's what that one's about.
Wow, yeah, it's turmoil current right now. I mean, it's just turmoil. And I just said to someone else the other day that all my entire life, Haiti has never been. I mean, it's always been in turmoil my entire life.
Yes,
You
yes,
know,
it's
so
very
it's
sad.
just unfortunate. So, have you had any feedback from middle graders about Force of Nature?
It's really just been out since March, so I haven't really. I've visited a few schools and read some parts with them, and one girl has written to me so far from one of the schools I visited that she loves it and that she loves Rachel Carson, and hopefully more will be moved by her. I really want kids to realize that they can make one voice makes a difference. And so really it's too soon to tell, but I have gotten lots of feedback from the places that I visited that this was a good book to put in the hands of kids, that this is a message that maybe kids need to hear, that they can make a difference. One person can make a difference.
Definitely. I have put this in the hands of adults. I think adults need to read this book as
I
well.
do. I
And
do.
it's just a beautiful written book. And the illustrations, the illustrator,
She's wonderful.
Sophie
She's
Blackhall,
yeah, she's wonderful.
incredible illustrations. And so I will tell you, I posted an Instagram post a few weeks ago, and I'm outside and I'm in my yard, and I take a picture of my Bradford pear trees, which bloomed white and they were incredibly beautiful. And I referenced Rachel Carson, and it made me want to go outside and look at nature, because nature is indeed soothing. There's parts of nature I don't like
I'm not a
ants, spiders, and
that's
snakes.
when people heard I was writing a nature book, they were like, "You don't let you hate bugs," and I'm really trying. You know, it's true story that Rachel's mom taught her to put the glass on the spider, slip the paper under the spider, and bring a spider outside if it was down in the house. And I tell them, like, I'm not there yet. I'm not there
Not,
yet.
yeah, I'm not there yet, but blooming trees and blooming
Yes,
bushes and flowers, I'm with that. I have
yes,
beautiful tulips in my front yard. I appreciate the work of bees.
yes.
But me and ants, I don't know if me and ants will ever connect. I don't
I don't think so. I think I'm going to have to draw the line at ants. But I do. I have had a spider in my house and thought that maybe I could get the glass, and I wasn't strong enough, but I got the shoe, which is not good.
just not. Let's end this positively.
But I'm not going to do that again. I don't know what I'll do next, but
I know. Sweep him out.
that's a good one. Sweep them outside. That would have been much better.
Well, Amberg, it's been a pleasure talking to you. It's been a pleasure reading about Rachel Carson and talking to you about Rachel Carson. I thank you for writing this book. It's very enlightening. And like we just said, it's not only wonderful for children, middle graders, but it's also wonderful for adults.
Thank
And
you.
also, we will have your social media information and book information in the podcast show notes and in the video description box on YouTube. And thank you for joining me today.
Thank you so much for inviting me.
I appreciate it.